Hey guys, it's Jace here at the Forestry Project. Today's video is just going to kind of be a short intro to management plans and how to get started thinking about what to do when, thinking about the ecology of your site. If you listen to episode 3 of the podcast with Dr. Cush, we were talking about ecology, really delving into think about ecology, think about the timing of everything. That's another important thing about management plans. They provide you with a timeline of what to do. But when you're thinking about that, you also have to think about how the species interact, how they grow, how they're affected by the climate, to understand what you might want to do in order so that you can prevent making extra management activities for yourself. You've seen us break the property down into stands. So now let's look at how would we manage each stand and what was the benefit of actually breaking those down so that now we can see, okay, each of these stands are going to be managed differently. What are we trying to get them to and how do we manage? So go ahead, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, like this video, drop a comment about what you're wanting to do as far as management, some of the species that you're trying to get back on your property, or some of the species that you have that's really neat that you would like to showcase. I would love to hear it. If you haven't yet, also go follow us on all of the social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram at @the_forestry project at @the_forestry project on Instagram and the Forestry Project on Facebook. Thank you guys so much for your support in the month of February. We've grown a lot and I'm very excited to where this is going to go. So let's get into management plans. All right, so if you can see behind me, we're in the pond stand next to the larger of the two ponds that we have on the property. And let's talk about how we might want to think of managing this. So I know the family enjoys coming out here, recreating, enjoying the area. We have easy road access coming in, so we want to keep it as easily accessible as possible. So one of the things we want to do is keep the grasses there, so we might want to consider burning. But also we won't, since we're coming out and enjoying this area, we also want to have some privacy. So if you see behind me over there, there's a road that runs, there's a road cutting off the property and it runs out. So when anyone drives by, you can see them, they can see you. And we would like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but we would like to be able to come out here and enjoy it without having people driving by and all of that. So I'm going to go pick up some bald cypress. I'm going to the Walker County Forestry Planning Committee is having a tree sale the first Friday in March. So I'm going to go to that and get some bald cypress, get a few other species that I'll talk about later as far as some of the different stands are concerned. But we're going to plant them across the back side of the pond is just kind of a little, natural breakup instead of just having grass field in the road. The bald cypress will continue on around here, but now let's talk about what we want to do on this side of the pond. So in an earlier video when I was just kind of showing the property, I talked about this was going to remain in grasses. I wanted to keep this in grasses. So we're going to try to get some more native stuff growing in here. That's going to be done primarily through fire. So we'll burn this. In a later video, I'll talk about what to think about when you're starting to burn, what equipment you might need, and then how to go about getting the proper training to be able to do it efficiently, effectively, and also safely for both yourself and the adjoining landowners. But let's look at, we want some more hydric species around the edge of the pond. So you can see right down in here we have some common rush, and then moving up we have some different yard grasses, and then quite a bit of sagebrush has came back in. So we're going to be mowing and burning the grass field, and then we'll be interplanting some native hydric species and working on the bald cypress along the background. And that's going to kind of be the main activities we'll try to do this year for the pond stand. However, with a management plan, you want to be thinking far in advance. You don't want to just be thinking about what you're going to do this year. You really want to be thinking long term. So long term, we plan on, we're going to, well, cut the mimosas down, get some more native trees planted along the edge, get some more native vegetation on the edge of the pond, and then get some more native vegetation up on the grassy area so that we can start getting a lot of the invasives out, be able to run fire through it, be able to mow it if need be. But predominantly, I want this to kind of be a burn stand, and we're going to start working with a few people on getting the vegetation that the beaver needs to be sustained on the property, and that way I can showcase the beaver and the benefits of having beavers on your land in future videos. Now let's hop into the woods and see how we might want to think about managing it. So when we think about what we want to do in each stand and why we broke them apart separately, let's look at some of the species that are already out there. And in a future video, I plan on going through how to use the Silvix manual, what to look for, and kind of how to decide what species you might want out on your land. But let's just go through and talk about what might be different in the upland hardwood pine stand than in just the pine stand by the pond. When you're thinking about your land and you're thinking about what you want to manage, think about the easiest spreading species out there. And right now it's Chinese privet. If you look behind me, this property is covered with it. You can see it a little bit better now that it's starting to green up. You can see what privet is. So all of this green in the understory is Chinese privet. It spreads extremely easily. And if you remember in the ecology podcast, we talked about what I should do on my property to convert all of this loblolly pine behind me into a longleaf pine ecosystem. And I asked the question, would it be better to cut it all down and restart, or should I maybe open it up a bit and then interplant longleaf pine in the understory and just have a loblolly pine overstory for a bit? That's actually started being quite common, where you'll have a longleaf understory that you're restoring, but you still retain the loblolly overstory, the full grown trees, just not as heavy as what it would be if it was just as forest. So I know I will remove some of, if not a lot of, the loblolly, but let's think about that. And this is where understanding the species and having a plan is so important. So if I just went in and cut all of the loblolly pine down right now, what I would have is an area that grew back with a few loblolly pine, because they're gonna seed back in. They're very good at seeding back into a landscape. That's why they're here now. I would have a few sweet gums, because they're very good as well. But mostly I would have Chinese privet. They would grow back in very rapidly. And when you think about forests, a lot of time the limiting factor on what can grow, you have, soil can be your limiting factor. You can have weather conditions, whether hot, cold, whatever, and that affects broad scale ranges and stuff like that. However, on a really local scale, a lot of times it's sunlight. So if you think about a forest that's really closed off, we talked about this in the ecology episode. If you have a forest that's really dense, there tends not to be as much, grasses in the understory and stuff like that. Whereas if you see the really open, kind of savanna type forests, they have a lot more grasses because a lot more sunlight is able to hit the forest floor. So if I were to cut all of the overstory trees right now, all of the new sunlight that overstory is capturing would now be hitting the flower, and all of this Chinese privet would just explode. They would be everywhere. So I want to avoid that. I want to make sure in managing my land and doing stuff, I don't create more work for myself later on. And that's where having a dedicated plan that goes out in time is so important. So when I think about how to restore this stand, I'm thinking the first thing I need to do is control invasives. I need to get out here, get the privet at least semi-managed. I'm going to try cutting it down, and there's some areas that I want to burn this year. So I'll do that and then see. I'm either considering, you can do herbicide to control for invasives or any undesirable species. You can also, animals are a great way to control. If you remember in the ecology podcast, we talked about that grazing animals can mimic the disturbance of fire. So I could get goats out here and they could help keep vegetation under control. Or I could also consider mowing. Always think outside the box. If you have land and you have a riding lawnmower and you want to cut all the privet down to where the riding lawnmower wouldn't hit it, and then drive back over it a few times a year just keeping the privet mowed down, that works. We're now over in the oak savanna stand that we drew out first, and there's already a lot of oaks that we might could keep. Now I've seen some water oaks and stuff that I don't think would do well in fire. I don't really want those. But I've also seen a couple laurel oaks, some red oaks that I think could withstand the fire. So instead of just trying to cut everything down and restart, let's look at what we already have out on the property. So what I want to do here as far as management, I will go through and cut a bit of the privet, but I'm going to go around the edge of the stand. If you remember in the mapping video, I walked that road down when I was starting to create this. Well, I'm going to extend the road completely around the stand, and I will burn just the road to begin with. And that way I have the start of a good fire break that I can then move in 20 or so feet, burn out around to the break, and that way I have about a 30-foot span that has already been burned, and that would be my fire break so that I can run fire through this stand. But what I want to do is start burning it first so I can see if any of the oak species that are out there withstand the fire and survive it. That means that's just less that I have to plant. I may not have to do as much to this stand, other than I will need to cut down some of the pine just to open up the stand a bit, but I might not have to go in and plant as much here as I would if it was just pines. I can let the oaks that already grow here, are already established and I know can withstand fire, grow back here, as well as there's a couple of really unique oaks that I want to get planted into here that I'm trying to work with some people on getting some, and I think that'd be really cool for a few videos. But other than that, I plan on just burning this and kind of seeing what comes up. Now when you're thinking about management plans and stuff, it's always good to have some sort of notes, some sort of written out plan, and you can make it as complex or as simple as you want it to be. Typically, the simpler it is, the easier it is to follow, and the more likely you are to actually achieve what you're trying to achieve. It's always good to set, high ambitions, but understand if you have, say the forest that I have out here just naturally grown up, you're not going to bring it to an area with no invasives and just the species you want in a year or two. So having a realistic expectation for it is always key. Also, when you're out here and you're looking at stuff, really think about, we talked about the ecology. Look at what's growing out there. Look at the Silvex manual, which, like I said, I'll show that in a very soon to come out video. And then see what's already out on the property and decide whether the species that you want out on your property actually can be. A great source to look at is the Web Soil Survey. If you want to see more about that, I encourage you to check out how to use and understand maps. That's kind of the conclusion of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I encourage you, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. It really benefits me and it helps our analytics on YouTube and get the Forestry Project out to a broader audience. Also, I ask that you would listen to the Forest Management Plan podcast coming out Monday with Dr. Maynard. It's going to be very informative on what to consider for your management plan, who to talk to about getting a management plan for your property, and it really will provide the information that you'll want for this video if you're considering it on a broader scale. Also, drop a comment down below about the unique ecosystems that you're trying to manage on your property. I'm always interested in hearing what other landowners are seeing on their property, what species they have, what they're trying to get to. And I want to know future content that I need to put out. So drop a comment if there's something that you want to see specifically, a species that you want me to cover. I'm always interested in tailoring the content of the Forestry Project to the audience, and instead of just showing what I'm experiencing, showcase what everyone else is experiencing. With that, guys, thank you so much for the support you've shown me. Until next time, happy management and God bless.